On today's show, how do I grade the Nets rookies at the All-Star break? What players on this team are long-term pieces? What prospects could Brooklyn be eyeing in the 2026 draft? I'll answer all those fan questions and more on today's episode of Locked On Nets.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to Locked On Nets, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now the number one sports podcast network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm your host, Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. The show is 100% free on all those great platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. And on today's episode, it's part 2 of this week's Fan Take Friday. I got a lot of submissions on this week's mailbag. Part 1 went over some of the tanking issues in the NBA. What do I think the Nets' most likely lottery outcome is? And part 2, going to get into some of the rookies and also some 2026 draft stuff. So first question, Erik, I'd love for you to do a version of rookie report cards. Give them a letter grade for the first 2/3 of the season, what they did best and what needs improvement. That's from Corey Cantor. And look, the report card thing, I don't really do that. I think that's very subjective, like giving them a letter grade. So rather than do that, I kind of just will break them up into tiers of how I think they performed. And in a tier 1 of guys who I'd say are exceeding expectations right now, I'd put Egor, Demin, and Nolan Traore in that tier. And I'll focus on those two guys before getting into the rest. I think that both of them, Egor and Nolan, have turned in very encouraging stretches. Egor for a larger portion of the season. But since Nolan has become a full-time rotation member and gotten a starting role, he's looked very effective. And if we're talking about what I've liked from each of them individually, for Egor, it's obviously the three-point shooting. Like, he's looked like one of the better floor spacers in the league as a rookie. Like, without a doubt, one of the better floor spacers as a rookie that you're ever going to see. But for the entire NBA, if you expand it to that, like, he's been one of the best shooters in the league. And that is saying something. For a kid who's 19 years old, for a kid who there are a lot of questions surrounding his three-point shot, I've said that I feel like the three-point shooting, if Egor can be a positive shooter, it'll give him a floor. The ceiling will depend on a lot of other stuff. So the three-point shooting, the defense, he's been a pretty good decision maker, 2 assist to turnover ratio up to this point. As I said, the ceiling, though, that's going to depend on a lot of other developments, like his ball handling, his adding strength, him being able to kind of leverage his passing ability by actually creating some advantages for himself. And all of that is stuff that I think is going to get better, with him adding weight and adding some mass and adding some strength and being able to play with some physicality. The thing that I would like to see improve with him during the second half of this season is just trying to play with more force, trying to play with more strength. Like, yes, he's very slight. Like, he's going to need to add more muscle. It's going to be more difficult for him right now, but at least try to get downhill, try to force the issue, try to play with some physicality through content, even if it looks ugly, through contact. Even if it looks ugly, that's what I would say the challenge is for him. But I think that is going to improve, as he gets more size and improves as a ball handler and works on his skills and honing his craft. For Nolan Traore, like, the decision-making as of late has been at a pretty high level. He's a very good passer. I think he's making that clear, and he's been able to, kind of slow down, kind of add more pace to his game when he does create these advantages, get these blow-bys, turn the corners on pick and roll. He's also improved his touch, at the rim, also in the mid-range, and he's starting to shoot a little bit better, show some flashes of being a confident three-point shooter. So with Nolan, the things that I think you want to see her improve are the three-point shooting. That's going to need to come around. That's going to be a big swing skill for him. And then also just continuing to kind of hone that craft when you get into the paint, when you get amidst the trees down low, all of those things. But I think you'd be very encouraged by what both of those guys have done. Next tier, I've said it's exceeding expectations. Next tier I'd put at, meeting expectations or being on par with expectations. I put Drake Powell and Danny Wolf in that tier. Both of those guys have had their ups, they've had their downs, they've had their flashes, games where they've stuck out and looked like really effective players, and then games where you don't really notice them that too much, or you notice them in a negative way. And if I'm focusing on Drake Powell, I think that his defense and his athleticism, that has, kind of played at the NBA level the way that you thought it would. You see him impacting the game in those areas, especially defensively. And then also, if you talk about offensively, he's been better as an on-ball creator, as a secondary shot creator than I thought. He's gotten downhill. He's gotten into the mid-range, been able to hit jumpers. He's been able to create shots in spurts when he's tried to. But then there's a lot of games where he's kind of just floating and you don't really notice him that much. So improvement areas, I'd say getting involved in the offense more. And then the 3-point shooting. I mean, Drake's around 30%. Like, I think he's dipped below 30% from the season. And he was a good 3-point shooter last year, like 38% on low volume. And that's going to be a question with him. I think that it's pretty clear that he's not going to be like a movement shooter or anything like that at a high level. But if he can be a efficient standstill catch and shoot 3-point shooter, or like relocations, not like flying off of, pin downs or anything and curling into 3-point shots, nothing like that, but be an effective 3-point shooter. That's going to go a long way for him. So continuing to improve the secondary ball handling, the secondary shot creation, and the 3-point shooting, those are going to be the big things for Drake. And then for Danny, just, he's really hasn't been too effective scoring from 2, or too efficient scoring from 2 or scoring from 3. He's held up defensively better than I thought he would with him playing a lot of minutes on the wing. But the questions that I've had about Danny is where is he going to score on? Where is he going to score from the floor efficiently? Like, he's not a high-level finisher right now. He struggles with that, being a grounded athlete. The 3-point shot hasn't come along. I have more hope that he could develop as a 3-point shooter than as being like this high-level 2-point finisher, because I just don't see his athleticism getting that much better. Like, that kind of is what it is. The 3-point shot you hope would have some room for development. So, getting more efficient, as a shooter from 3, and then also on his drives to the rim in the mid-range, and then decision-making, kind of cleaning up some of the spots where he decides to go, and then the pass, and cleaning that up with some of the turnovers. Last tier I would have is have concerns, but there is some hope, and that would be Ben Sharaf, who's obviously struggled early this season. We just haven't really seen Ben get comfortable on the court, it looks like, that much. Like, you see the glimpses. You see the advantage creation. You see him get downhill, have these crossovers, have these spin moves, have these decels, the passing ability. He's clearly a good passer, a gifted passer, but he's just looked out of rhythm, and the 3-point shot is, a major question mark, because he is the least natural shooter out of this group. So how does he develop in those areas? That's going to be a big storyline moving forward, but there are legitimate questions about how he's going to fit in the NBA long term. And that brings me to the next question. How would you rank the Nets rookies in terms of how likely they are to be on an NBA roster in 5 years? And that's from TJ Ramsey. And this might sound like a cop-out, but I honestly think I would put it just in the order that they were drafted. I'd go Egor 1, Nolan 2, Drake 3, Danny 4, and Ben 5. And the guys that I'm really confident about would be Egor, Nolan, and Drake. Maybe you could throw Danny Wolf into that conversation just because of the size, the ball handling he has. But if he's not shooting it at a decent level, I think it's going to be tough for him. So I'd say Egor and Nolan, I feel like, are pretty close to locks just because of the skills that they have. Like, Egor has an elite skill as a 3-point shooter, and we all know the size, the secondary passing ability he has, what he should be able to do on defense. And then you look at Nolan, he has an elite skill as an advantage creator and a facilitator, like great vision, great advantage creation. It's going to come down to some, skills in terms of the 3-point shooting, some of those swing skills, but he also has good size at the point guard position at 6'4". He can hold up defensively, if not maybe develop into a plus defender. So those two guys, I think they have traits that make them very likely. Drake Powell, I think there's more questions about the secondary shot creation. Obviously, like, it's looked better than it did at North Carolina, but still, at North Carolina, he posted the lowest usage rate by a guard in NBA history. So, him developing in that area, how do you scale up his offensive role? That's a question. And the 3-point shooting, I said, he's a smidge below 30% from 3 for the season. So if that doesn't get better, that'll leave a lot to be desired offensively. He could struggle in those areas, but still, I think that the transition play finishing that he can bring to the table, the defense that he can bring to the table, the point of attack defense, I just think that those things, the athleticism, those things should allow him to stick in the NBA. But whether he's going to be an actual rotation piece for a good team, it will come down to some of the development in those offensive areas. And then Danny Wolf, same thing I said. I think that him being a 6'11" guy with the skills that he has, that should give him a good chance to stick in the league. But he's really going to need to improve as a 3-point shooter, because if he doesn't improve as a 3-point shooter, I'm not really sure that he's fit to be a center in the NBA long term, and I just don't know if he's going to be able to play the wing. Like, he has that advantage creation ability, kind of that funky style that he can play, but he's going to have to be off the ball, because he's not going to be like a featured piece who's just getting the ball and cooking. So if he's going to be off the ball, he's going to need to be able to shoot from 3. But I do have some hope for him. And then Ben, we'll see. Same thing. 3-point shots got to develop, but he has good positional size. He has some of those other tools. Got a lot more questions about the rookies, some about what the best case scenario is for each of them, and then some about how Egor, Nolan, some of these other guys can fit together or change positionally as they move forward with the Nets. So I'll get into all that when I continue the show after a quick break. The Winter Games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events that you will only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years, and that's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. Guys, you have the drama of curling matches that start slow and sometimes get intense fast, speed skating races decided by inches, hockey games that feel different right from the opening face-off, even niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. FanDuel keeps the Olympics experience engaging from start to finish. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Guys, hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And if you want the candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed Sponsored Jobs is the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, like skills, certifications, and location. Guys, if I were hiring, I wouldn't just want someone who can help. I'd want someone with real experience who can jump right in. That's what I like about Indeed. You can get specific and target exactly what you need. It saves time because you're spending less energy sorting through mismatches. And with sponsored jobs, your posts get seen by candidates who are actually a fit. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Coming back from the break, continuing today's Locked On Nets episode on part 2 of this Fan Take Friday. Rolling on through your takes and questions. Next one. Hey, Eric, just wondering if you could give the 5 rookies each a best-case scenario career-wise. Thank you. That is from Blaine Rose. And, I'd say if I start with Egor, I think that the best-case scenario for Egor would be that he maintains a high-level three-point shooter, which I think there's a good chance of that. He's able to be a adequate to maybe a plus defender with the size if he can add strength. And then some of the other things like the ball handling, the advantage creation, some of those things actually come around, and he's actually able to do some things on the ball offensively rather than just being this spot up three-point shooter. But if all those things could come together, if he can, develop at least some ancillary ball handling skills where he can leverage his passing ability a little bit more, it's not out of the question that he could make a few all-star teams if he can do that stuff. Now, it's a huge if, but he's 19 years old. Like, as he adds some size, as he adds some strength, we'll see how that develops. But, in 3 years, Egor could look like a very different player. So I think the best case scenario for him would be a very high-level rotation piece, maybe that can make a few all-star teams. For Nolan, I think it's somewhat of a similar deal, him making all-star teams in the future. I'm not sure how likely that is because I just don't think that he has necessarily like the most natural, like mid-range scoring chops or three-point shooting. I think that stuff will have to come along in a big way. But if he can become an adequate three-point shooter, if he can have the touch in the mid-range that we've seen some promising signs of early on, he could be a good starter in a rotation just because of the size he has, the positional size at point guard, the passing ability, the speed, all of that stuff I think should play well. And then if we're talking about the other guys like Drake, Danny, Ben, if Drake could be a starter, I think that would be a good outcome for him. I think that there's going to have to be a lot of things that come along offensively for him to hit that ceiling. But I think it's possible. But I think that there are a lot of questions about his offensive game. And then for Danny and Ben, I don't want to put like a ceiling on anybody. I think that those guys maybe down the line could develop into starting level pieces. Like, they're still young. But I think those guys being rotation pieces on a good team would be a good outcome for them. Next question. Do you think Egor Demin has the possibility to be developed into a shooting guard? He's a lot worse at ball handling than Traore, and with Nolan popping off, he'll be playing more at the point. It's just that Egor only really catches and shoots most of the time, usually drifting around the court. That's from Easy Money Sniper D7. And yeah, like, I wouldn't get too obsessed positionally with the Egor thing. I don't think he's going to be a point guard long-term. I don't think that's the spot where he's going to end up. I think the Nets have probably already come to that conclusion. Although, he's so early in his development, it's tough to put a ceiling on him right now. He could play shooting guard. He can play the wing. He can play the point in spurts if he improves as a ball handler. I think that's the beauty of Egor, is some of the positional versatility that his size offers him. Now, if he can develop on-ball skills, that'll bolster that positional versatility even more. But he could play alongside a guy like Nolan. He could play alongside Nolan and another, shooting guard. I think that's kind of the beauty of Egor. So I wouldn't get too obsessed with how you view him positionally. Next question. Nolan was mocked as a top 5 draft pick prior to the 2024-25 season, which would hypothetically mean all-star legit starter potential. He dropped, but is showing why he was mocked as a top 5 pick now. Could he be our long-term starter of the future and have potential to be a star? That's from Dan Leahy. And yeah, like the Nets, part of their draft strategy was taking upside swings, taking swings on guys with past pedigree. We saw that with Egor, a player who a lot of people had as a top 5 prospect. Same thing with Nolan. Drake was a lottery, projected prospect, top player, number 2 player in his high school class. So the Nets took swings on that. Like, yes, Nolan fell because of some of the things that he struggled with in St. Quentin in France last season, which was the outside shot, playing with some pace, kind of harnessing the speed that he has. But yeah, like, could he be a long-term starter? I think Nolan could definitely be a long-term starter, especially with some of the skills that he's showing as a facilitator, kind of slowing down his process right now. He's only 19 years old, and he has a lot of room to grow physically. So I think that Nolan could be a starter. Do I see star potential for him? I think that's probably rich, but, we'll see. Like, he has to play against some better competition, but I would be encouraged by what he's done thus far. Next question. Do you think that because the Nets didn't get a top 3 pick last year, they decided to draft players who are more likely to develop into cost-efficient role players, so the base for a star was already there? That's from Tom Frezza. So, yeah, I guess the question is, do you think that the Nets were drafting more safe picks and not going on not taking as many upside swings because they fell outside of the top 3? No, I don't think that's the case. I think that the Nets were going with a lot of upside swings. I think they took a lot of bites at the apple with this, going with multiple guys who are ball handlers, multiple guys who had overlapping skill sets. And as I said in my last answer, multiple guys who had past pedigree and past ceiling. So I don't think that they were trying to necessarily play it safe by drafting some of these guys. I just think they fell. They had 8. They took Egor, and then they had, 19, 22, 26, 27. You're not really going to find guys who are star level upside guys there, or star level skill, ready-made skill set guys there at that point in the draft. So I think that they took a lot of upside swings. And if you think that some of these guys are more likely to be role players, that's just more so based on the spots where the Nets ended up picking, I would say. That does it for the rookie questions, but I got a lot more questions about the 2026 draft, how the Nets could approach that, what players they could be targeting in the top 4, and also beyond that. So I'll get into all that when I close out Locked On Nets after a quick break. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. Guys, you'll pull up the Game Time app, pick an upcoming NBA game, and have tickets locked in within minutes. You'll love seeing the all-in price up front, no surprise fees at checkout. Being able to see the view from the seat before buying makes the decision easy, and zone deals, they'll stand out. Choose the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save big. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today, and remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. Coming back from the break, closing out today's Locked On Nets episode, this Fan Take Friday. Rolling on through all your remaining takes and questions. Next question, purely from a fit perspective, who makes the most scheme fit sense for the Nets in this draft? That's from Nate Hillman. And this is a question I've gotten from a lot of fans, and my response has been that the Nets have a way that they want to play, obviously. They want to be a fast-paced team. They want to take a lot of threes. They want to have great positional size at a lot of places, but that's at a lot of positions. But that's something that, a lot of other teams want to do those things. Most teams in the NBA want to do those things. I would say that when you're drafting, hopefully in the top 4, top 5, you don't draft a player necessarily to fit your system, especially when you're as blank a canvas as the Nets are. You draft a player. Obviously, you want to draft a player who fits your philosophy, but you're going to bring a player in, and you're going to fit a lot of the system around those players. So if you look at the top guys in the draft this year, if we're saying Darren Peterson, AJ DeBansta, Cam Boozer, Caleb Wilson, any of those guys can fit with the Nets, and the Nets can fit their system around any of those guys. If you're asking who's the best fit, I mean, like a guy like Darren Peterson, you're not going to go wrong, who has, a 6'5" shooting guard who has dribble pass shoot ability, is a big time shot maker, has good athleticism. You're not going to go wrong with him. DeBansta, I mean, people have questions about his 3-point shot, but I think he's, 6'9", can play defense, can create off the dribble, can run pick and roll, can come off of zoom and pin down sets. Not going to have an issue with him. And then Cam Boozer, Caleb Wilson, great size, high IQ players, high feel players. I just think that any of these guys are going to fit into what the Nets are trying to do. And I think that the Nets are going to fit the system around them. Like, that's one of the strengths that Jordi Fernandez has shown thus far. He had a guy like Cam Johnson as his top offensive option. He was able to fit the system around him. We're seeing him get a lot out of Michael Porter Jr. We're seeing how he's been able to utilize Egor Demin. Like, I just think that there's a lot of different ways that Jordi Fernandez has been able to fit systems around different players already. And if you give him a talent like the guys at the top of this draft, he'll be able to continue to do that. I have no doubts about that. Next question. We know the top 4 in this draft. Say the Nets pick 5 through 8. How would you rate those players as fits for this team? That's from Ross Goldban. And look, I've watched some college basketball this year with me, following the Nets and following the NBA as a whole, watching every Nets game, a lot of other NBA games. I'm not going to say that like I've had that much time to just dig into all of the draft prospects right now. I've seen a lot of them. I would say, in the pick 5 through 8 range, like you're looking at guys that you're hearing about, like Keaton Wagler, Darius Acuff, Michael Brown, Jaden Quintons. I'm missing somebody else. Kingston Flemings from Houston. Like, you have all those guys. If I'm talking about guys that I think would be a good fit for the Nets, similar to what I said, with my answer for the top 4, I think that a lot of these guys are just going to be system fits based on the skill sets that they bring to the table and the upside that they have. I've seen Keaton Wagler play a decent amount because he's been going off in recent games. And I think that some people have questions about him because he's not like the most athletic. He's not the most, shifty. He doesn't have the best burst. But I'd say with him, he looks like a legitimate dribble pass shoot threat, and he looks like a very high-level shooter, and he has good positional size, high feel player. I think that he would fit in a similar mold to a lot of what we saw with some of these other Nets guys. I think you might say that you want some more athleticism. But, Keaton Wagler, I think Kingston Flemings could check that athleticism box because he's a very forceful player. Darius Acuff, same things. Like, those guys bring some more of the force and athleticism, downhill juice, where, Keaton Wagler is a little bit more of the shooter. But I think that both of those guys, all of those guys could fit in. I think they just bring different things to the table. So if the Nets are picking in the 5 through 8 range, I think that all of them could be fits. If you're looking to kind of juxtapose some of like the high feel, not as athletic guys that the Nets have, a guy like Kingston Flemings, a guy like Darius Acuff, guys who have a little bit more athletic pop. Jaden Quintons is a big man, but you could say similar things about him. Kingston Flemings. Like, I just think that those guys could also fit. It depends on like whether you're trying to kind of zag from some of the things that you went for in this previous draft class. But overall, I think that the Nets are going to be going for ceiling. They're going to be going like these past guys that they picked will play some role in determining, the next draft pick. But I think that it's going to play a small role, and they're going to be going for upside and trying to get the best player they can get, going BPA. Last question. Some fans seem all or nothing for the top 4 draft position. It would be great, but what are Brooklyn's plan B and C if land outside the top 4? I think it's not the end of the world if we pick closer to 8 again. That's from Kimball Prime. And somewhat of a similar question to my last one. Look, if they picked 8, am I going to say it's the end of the world? I think that's pretty strong. I mean, given the fact that they could still get a very good player at 8, they still have some promising pieces from this last draft class. They still have league-leading draft capital, cap space moving forward. But it would be really disappointing if they picked at 8. I mean, if they picked at 8 in back-to-back drafts with the strength of some of the players in the top 5, 6 of these last 2 draft classes, that would be, not disastrous. I mean, disastrous might be fair, honestly. Like, it would be a really, really disappointing outcome. And that might lead them, if they fell to 8, maybe that changes how they look at it. Maybe they say that we could try to get, somebody via trade. Maybe we can go after somebody that can be our top dog because maybe we didn't land a player in these 2 drafts who we think can be that level of player. I'm not saying that's definitely the case, but I do think it changes the equation if you pick 8 as opposed to picking in the top 4. So, getting into the top 4 obviously is going to be huge for this Nets team. I don't think it's the end of the world at 8. As I said, you have guys like Keaton Wagler, Darius Acuff, Kingston Flemings, Jaden Quintons, Michael Brown. I don't know if I mentioned Michael Brown in my previous answer, but there are a lot of good players in this draft. But getting one of these guys in the top 4, getting one of these guys that can be a face of your franchise type player, that is going to be huge. And I think that whether or not they feel they did that is going to play a big role in how they handle their assets and how they kind of handle this timeline in this rebuild moving forward. But that's all I got for you guys on this part 2 of this Fan Take Friday. Thank you to everyone who continues to submit questions. I've gotten a really good response to these episodes. The mailbag submissions just keep growing, and I really have a good time doing them, so I appreciate it. But if you guys do not already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you enjoy my content, take a second right now, smash that like button, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review. Anything you can do to engage is much appreciated. We got the All-Star break, some time off from Nets games, and we still got a ton to talk about involving the Nets. I'll have coverage of all that and more when I'm back on Monday talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.